when distress occurs to someone, when someone's just overwhelmed with emotions, it just feels like complete chaos to people. Okay, and that's sort of scary as well, which sort of adds to the distress. Okay, so what we want to do today is we want to basically put some order into that chaos. Okay, to help you make sense of distress, so you don't feel so lost and chaotic and overwhelmed in the distress.
Yeah, we want you to understand what's actually happening as part of the process, because then you can also see where are your opportunities for kind of exits out of the cycle, or for you to be skillful throughout the cycle.
Yeah. So we've got this thing that we call the distress cycle.
Yeah, we're going to hand out for it as well. It's up on the website.
So check that out. Okay, and we've written it out here. Okay. Essentially, distress doesn't come out of the blue. It comes from some sort of event. Okay, so it's commonly referred to as a trigger. So, I got triggered by this, or I got triggered by that.
And this could be the internal or external. Sometimes the event is a memory. Sometimes it's a kind of a catastrophizing thought. But more often than not, something within your environment has happened or not happened in the way you wanted it to.
Yeah, so an invalidation is another example. So you can have an invalidation is if you're sensitive to invalidation. If someone says something or does something that makes you feel bad about yourself, or if they didn't do something or didn't say something, and by not doing that, that makes you feel bad.
Invalidation is a sense of your emotional state has been dismissed or minimized or kind of challenged when you're told your feelings don't matter, or you shouldn't feel that way, or things like that. So invalidation is usually on an emotional level.
Yeah, a very common kind of thing that can set this off. Okay, so the trigger happens. Okay, and then we instantaneously, when that happens, we make it's like a low resolution interpretation of what happened. Okay, and we refer to that sort of generically as a snap judgment. Okay, and sometimes you don't even really notice. Sometimes you do. Okay, but sometimes you don't notice it all that well.
Yeah, so from a CBT point of view, we'd refer to this as the automatic thought. We know that there is always a thought that precedes the emotional response and the consequences. You're just not always aware of it, which is why we call it automatic. And if you don't practice a lot of mindfulness, or you don't have a lot of kind of awareness of what's going on inside your head, this will happen, but you'll miss it. Yeah, you can just it just feels like you blew right past it. But it happened, but it's just, it was that lower resolution that you mightn't have noticed it. But in any sense, the next thing is the one that we do notice. Okay, and that's when you get slammed with a big emotion. Okay, so this can happen for little things too, but that it doesn't tend to cause distress. So we're more worried about the kind of things that really kind of ramp up emotion. Okay, so then we end up with an intense emotion, anger, sadness, or fear generally. Okay, that's usually the big ones.
Distress. And that sets off like an alarm bell in your brain. Okay, and the manifestation of that is we get an increase in our sort of nervous system output, we get an increase in production of adrenaline, and that gives us these strong physical feelings. So fight-flight response can often get activated either partially or fully in this. And it can be, and again, sometimes people don't notice that well until afterwards. Sometimes people, they're not sort of that attuned to it. So often the sort of things that people might feel, they might feel really hot, they might feel really tense, they're making fists, they're clenching their jaw, their heart's pounding. Almost always there are breathing changes, but they're very underappreciated by people. Okay, so the strong physical feelings happen, and then we end up, if we haven't exited this, if we're really caught up in it, we end up with a situation where we're getting quite emotionally overwhelmed. Okay, so in this case, what started off as anger might now start to manifest as rage. Okay. What was sadness might manifest as despair. Or what was the other one? Anxiety might manifest as terror. Okay. So we're really off to the races now in terms of the degree of distress that we're feeling.
And there's usually also
the odd steam train coming past.
Haven't heard that one before. What also happens here is there's usually some sort of a cognitive appraisal as well of, I can't handle this is too intense, this is too much. And that in itself can actually also intensify the emotions associated with it.
Being overwhelmed results in a lot more arousal, more production of adrenaline, so it sort of keeps you in that cycle. Okay. Then it comes, often there's an urge to act. It's a way of kind of discharging the emotion, I guess. So if you're feeling enraged, the urge is to attack. It might be verbally, it might be physically, but that's the urge that underpins it.
Okay, right. If you didn't hear that, because I don't know how loud that steam train is on your end. So the action urge, and almost every emotion has their own individual action urge. So anxiety usually urges us to flee. Anger usually urges us to defend or attack. Sadness
Usually to
ideally,
isolate.
yeah, well, sadness ideally should kind of motivate us to connect, but if you've had bad experiences with that, then it's probably more likely to tell you to kind of isolate or disconnect, okay? So you've got an urge, and that the urge largely there is, I want to discharge the emotion. I want to do something to kind of get rid of the distress, or I need to do something about this distress because it's so big. And then we get to the behaviour.
The regrettable action. So that if you actually enact the verbal or physical attack,
Yes.
all right, or if you flee a situation and that's made you less skillful, say,
Yes.
all right, or if you're isolating, you're sad, you're isolating, or you've got suicidal ideation or this kind of thing, and you're entertaining that, then this is really not kind of helpful to
Yeah,
you. Okay,
yeah.
it's dysfunctional
Yeah.
almost. Look, there are some situations where it's not a regrettable action. You know, if the trigger is someone is attacking you, the snap judgment is, oh my god, I've got to get the hell out of here or fight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the emotions appropriate, the physical feelings are appropriate. The urge might be to attack, in which case attacking might be completely appropriate.
Yeah, and then we probably wouldn't have so much of a problem or a consequence of the distress cycle. So where we're actually applying this with our patients is people who have frequent episodes of distress, and usually the way that they try and handle their distress has more consequences further than that. So what I'd call problem behaviours when I'm working with it from a DBT point of view, self-harm, could be substance use, kind of a reliance on medication or drugs or alcohol to take the distress away, firing off that angry text to someone or whatever it is. So kind of if you've been able to kind of get to this point and you go, yeah, I'm not going to do, I've got this urge to do this thing, but that's a bad idea, I'm not going to do it, then you've exited, which is good, that's what we want. But if you haven't, then you come to here, and half the time your regrettable the consequences associated with your regrettable action could actually be your next trigger.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes, let's say you verbally attacked your partner or something, okay? And so that discharged the emotion of the anger, but now it's you look back and you regret what you've done. Oh my God, why did I do this? What's wrong with me?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, he's going to leave me.
Yeah, then the intense emotion might be sadness or fear about the consequences of that. And so kind of around you go.
Yeah. Okay, so what we want you to do is we want you to get to know your cycle of distress. So we've got the worksheet up here that kind of explains the cycle. It also shows you, kind of asks you kind of questions and prompts to try and identify at each point throughout it. Okay, what happened? What was the snap judgment? Could you identify it? What were the intense emotions you're experiencing? What was the primary emotion? What was the secondary emotion? The physical sensations, the intensity of the overwhelm. So rate that for me on a SUD scale 1 to 10. Okay. What was the urge? Was there a regrettable action?
Yeah. It's actually, it can be worth your while just to get this cycle really kind of clear in your head. So write it out a few times, maybe try to explain it to someone. If it's clear in your head, you have a better shot of actually accessing that when you're starting to get distressed.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then after so what you can do now, if you do have an episode of distress for whatever reason, okay, that now has become an opportunity for you to learn from that.
Yes.
Okay, so you can sit down and you can go through one of these worksheets, okay, you can actually figure out, well, what was the event, what was this, what was that, okay, and you can then have a greater appreciation of how your distress works, okay, and you do this every time, you become more skillful, okay, you become less lost in the chaos of this, and you collect these, all right, because you look at what the snap judgments were, all right, and that's a big clue. What are your cognitive biases? Because it's often not obvious to you what's going on there.
Yeah, also known as your schemas. So kind of what are the category? What are the kind of the category of the things that pushes your buttons or sets you off? So if you have a schema or a cognitive bias towards abandonment, the trigger may be sitting at a restaurant and with your partner, and you notice that their eyes wander and start gazing at some other kind of a gorgeous thing, and the snap judgment is, they like them better than me.
Yeah.
Or they're
going to
leave
me. Or
so
their eyes wandering, that means they don't like me enough. Yeah. So that's like a low resolution, instant kind of thought about what that means. Okay. The emotion that's going to go with that is that abandonment. That could be anger, could be fear. Okay. So potentially this is now escalating. All right. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm getting some strong physical feelings. I'm getting a bit overwhelmed. I'm sitting at a restaurant, but nevertheless, I blast my partner anyway. Yeah. So the urge is, I'm going to make him that's not okay. I've got to tell him this. And so the regrettable action is you throw your cocktail in his face and storm out of there or whatever. Yeah. Right? But let's say your kind of cognitive bias is more towards something like vulnerability to harm. So you're always catastrophizing that something bad's going to happen, and on this particular day,
your kid doesn't come home from school at time and they're not answering their phone, and you've gone to something bad's happened.
Yeah, so this would be classic for someone with generalised anxiety disorder, where there's a tendency to catastrophise everything. Okay, so yeah, my son's late. Oh my God, he's had a car accident. Okay, I'm freaking out big time. I'm getting overwhelmed, urge to act. I'm calling hospitals. I'm doing this. I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Then son walks in the door. It's not like thank God you're here. It's like, why didn't you call me? What?
Do you realise what I've been there?
And you completely tyrannise your son. So
rupture in relationship.
That mightn't feel regrettable at the time. Okay, but it's not good for your relationship.
Yeah. So these are the sort of things that kind of you'd be doing, and maybe in the moment it's kind of, oh, I had this little thing here and I had this little thing there. But if you do enough of those distress cycle worksheets and you start reviewing them, you're gonna start to find your patterns.
Yeah, you're gonna figure it out.
Those distress cycle worksheets and you start reviewing them, you're gonna start to find your patterns.
Yeah, you're gonna figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we'll leave it there, but we're going to follow this up with the next video, and I'm going to specifically, because I'm a DBT therapist, I'm going to specifically overlay where you can be using the DBT skills to assist with kind of giving you an exit opportunity for each of these stages in the distress cycle. So stay tuned for that one. We'll do that one next.
Yeah, thanks,
guys.
folks.
Bye.